Welcome back to the show. Many thanks for staying with us. Now, some 94 NDC members of parliament who endorsed the candidature of John Mahama for the flag bearer position of the party for the 2020 election say they have already set up a comprehensive national organization program to raise funds for the former president. Mr. Mahama officially declared his intention to run yesterday. His official declaration sets the tone for what would be a keen contest for the flag bearer position of the NDC. But what are his chances? Watch this.
Mr. John Mahama, former member of parliament for Bole, former deputy minister, former vice president, and former president, has arguably one of the richest political CVs in Ghana's politics today.
We cannot continue to export oil and gas. We need to integrate that industry into our economy. We need to process petroleum products and produce power with the gas.
These notwithstanding, the candidature of the former president puts the NDC in a very difficult, confused state. First, he represents the party's brightest chance at winning the next election, however dim the prospects may be. He is a household name. He has recognition. He remains a superstar. He has the nobility, the charisma, and the political acumen to back a claim for the presidency. And of course, the backs to run a campaign. However, Mr. Mahama appears to be putting personal interest over and above group interest. If Mr. Mahama does win in 2020 and leaves the presidency in 2025, election 2024 will need a fresh NDC candidate without history backing. This is perilous for the party. The prospects of winning the 2020 elections are bleak. It makes sense for the NDC to choose a candidate who can be marketed in 2020 and primed for the 2024 elections. A candidate who can run for 2 terms. This has been the main argument for Spiogabra, a contender in the race. And this is in the overall interest of the party, he says. Another thing that may plague a John Mahama candidature is what another contender, Aban Sumani Bagwin, described as a family and friends government. In NDC circles, Mr. Mahama is heavily criticized in hushed tones for alienating the core support base of the NDC. Many people in the traditional stronghold of the Volta region maintain the region and its people were largely ignored, both in terms of tangible development and representation in terms of appointments in the government. The election results were telling. Mr. Mahama obtained 80.97% of valid votes cast in the Volta region in 2016, compared to 85.47% in 2012. Given that the turnout in the region was low, a 5 percentage point drop of lower turnout was quite significant. This was a protest and vote of no confidence of sorts, Mr. Bagwin insists. It is therefore not surprising that stalwarts of the NDC from the region, like Victor Beho, will openly campaign for Professor Alabi. Also, clearly, Mr. Mahama comes to the ticket with a baggage. While the man was truly loved, his leadership attracted opprobrium for lack of decisiveness and clarity of purpose. Anti-corruption campaigners and civil society organizations are unanimous that he did very little in fighting against graft and ostentation in his government. He will therefore struggle to convince the electorate that he can do anything different. Closely related to this is the view that the president did not deliver to the satisfaction of the electorate, and this reflected on the emphatic rejection of his re-election bid. Mr. Mahama is the overwhelming favorite to win the nomination, but he may lead a fractured party into 2020 and probably leave it in a much worse state when he eventually bows out of the stage, whether or not he gets the opportunity to clean the blot on his rather unblemished record until 2016.
So that's some context and summary for you. I'll be having a conversation here in the studio with Malik Abbas-Tabu, Deputy Head of our Political Desk. Malik, it's good to have you. It's been a very long time since we sat on a desk together like this. But in the meantime, let me tell you this. The party yesterday opened nominations for persons who wish to contest for various positions, national positions. Already, the Deputy General Secretary, Koku Anyidoho, has picked up his nomination forms to slug it out with his boss, Asiedun Ketia, for the General Secretary position. Also, Former Attorney General Betty Modi Drisu and Samuel Ofuswampofo picked their forms to contest for the chairmanship slot. In the meantime, again, first Vice Chair and Director of Elections of the opposition NDC, Samuel Ofuswampofo, is kicking against suggestions that the current national executive who are seeking re-election should be voted out. He is aspiring, of course, to be the chairman of the party, and he believes that it will be suicidal for the party if the delegates heeded that call. He's been speaking to JoyNews' Kwesi Parker Wilson.
Even almighty Messi and Ronaldo, sometimes they go into football matches and their team lose. So all these are not equal. I will not say that. In fact, anybody who comes out with that proposal doesn't understand politics and doesn't know what institutional memory and experiences. Take the MPP. When they came, they lost power. They had some executives who steered the party, even when we were in government, and they lost power. They had to go back to the experienced ones. They went back for McManu, they went back for Dambotre, they went back for Lord Comey and others to come and play a key role in the last election. It means that...
But they were performing non-executive roles.
Well...
McManu was not an elected member of the party.
Well, but I'm saying that...
Wasn't.
I am saying that their experiences were brought to bear on the election that they won. And so you cannot wish away experience. Anybody who tells you that... I have served on IPAC, for instance, for the past 16 years or so. The wealth of experience that I bring to IPAC, you go to the Electoral Commission and ask them, you have been at IPAC meeting, and you yourself will bear testimony of the fact that, I mean, to wipe the slate is a suicidal mission. To say that NDC should wipe the slate and let all the current executive go is to say that we are committing a political suicide, and we'll pay a very dear price for it. And I will not go for that prescription.
Mr. Ofuswampofo, they will be doing some analysis, which is why Malik Abbas-Dabu is here with me in the studio. So, Malik, it's good to have you. We've been asking on social media, we've actually been running a poll asking people what do they think of Mr. Mahama's chances. I'd like you to speak to the results. Okay, I'd like to speak to the results. So let's take our viewers through the poll so far, the question that we asked and the answers that we've had so far. So we ask you, JM to win 2020 elections, what are his chances really? 35% voted yes. 65% voted no. The vote is still ongoing, 22 hours left. But what we have as of now, Malik, is quite interesting. What do you think?
Quite interesting, but we have to state categorically clear that this is an unscientific poll,
right?
And that you can't really put too much premium on this because it's not based on anything. It's just based on people's sentiments. And we have conducted similar polls before, and usually when we're heading towards elections, we do them on Major Online, and you have party leaders encouraging their people to go and vote, which speaks to the unscientific nature of this. Nonetheless, it can serve as a certain pointer to the way people still feel about this. I want to believe that if you put this poll up in 2011 or 2012, you would have a larger percentage of people saying they would vote for Mr. Mahama and not the other way around. And the reason you have the results the way they are is because I think that many people still have certain disappointments as far as Mr. Mahama's leadership is concerned, which is reflected in the 2016 election results. But were we surprised that he put in his bid? Absolutely not. Were we expecting it? Absolutely yes. Why were we expecting it? Right after the election, it was obvious that he was going to run.
Really?
Because you have to remember that immediately after the results were declared, questions were being asked. Given that he served one term, he's entitled to serve 2 terms under Article 66 of the Constitution. He served 1 term. He is entitled to run for another term. The Constitution grants him that right.
But when he made this announcement, he did indicate that this has taken him a very long time to, of sober reflections to make that. But
are you convinced by that?
I mean, taking that decision, whether or not you are popular enough to go, should obviously, I mean, it will make sense if you say that it took you a long time. Well, 2 years is quite a long time, but it took you a long time to...
What would you say if I point out to you that a few months after the election results were declared, when his brother Ibrahim Mahama said to us, JoyNews, that the family had prevailed on him not to run again, and that he had done his bit, he's contributed his quota to the development of his country, and that he should go and rest. How would you, if I said to you that days after that was said, he called up a couple of people and said, look, I do not think that we lost these elections fairly, let's run it again.
I see.
Immediately then.
So we're not surprised. We're not surprised, but really it has been about what his chances are. I mean, what's going to happen? It looks like very interesting times ahead. And Malik, I won't have you run your mouth too much. I'd like for you to keep speaking to what people are saying, right? So let's hear from some people on the streets. I mean, we went out with our cameras, spoke to a few people beside what we've done on social media. And by the way, I'll be reading to you some of the comments based on that vote that people have been casting on our social media platform. But hear what people had to say on the street. And when we come back, Malik will speak to that as well.
It depends on the party and the individual as well. You know, in everywhere you are, there are some people who will be against you and others who will be in your favor. So at the end of the day, when they do their voting, when he wins, he will be counted. But if he does not, if the party think they have somebody who is more better than him, then they will let him for him to come and lead the party and also Ghana as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think looking at his past record, he has done, comparing those who are in the same category that he's competing for, he stands a chance of winning. Another
person needs to be given more chances, because the people that are sending their tickets to stand on the NDC platform, to stand as a presidency, they all have credibility. And Mahama, he came and did his part. If he should do more, he would have done it a long time. Not after the change of government that you think you can come and change the country anymore.
The promise given us by the previous government, the current government, they are failing. It's a total failure. In fact, they've disappointed Ghanaians. And Ghanaians have regretted for giving Nanado the nod. So I think Mahama has a big chance for winning the 2020 elections.
Actually, Mahama coming back again, I don't think he has a chance of coming back, because MVP is doing everything we need, and then we're fine.
I say that if you should put this on the balance, on the beam balance, you are going to have a level. You're going to have some sort of a level positioning. But Malik, what do you make of all that they're saying?
Well, what I sensed was a certain incongruence in the manner in which they answered the question. Some people were answering the question in relation to whether he would win the flag bearership slot, and others were answering whether he would win the general election in 2020. So let's start with the first one first. He has to win the presidential primary, become the party's nominee before he can go into the 2020 election. Can he win that? The answer is an emphatic yes. Because given all the other 9 contenders, we have Professor Joshua Alabi, you have Alban Bagbin, you have Sylvester Mensah, you have Nuruddin Idrisu, you have Spio Gabra, you have Stephen Atubiga. And I said that Stephen Atubiga's contribution to this race will not go beyond its comic value. Nonetheless, he's in the race. You have Kweku Rikits-Hagan, all of these people. If you look at all of them, I think that the former president stands miles away from all of them, because this is, and I said this yesterday on radio, Mr. Mahama is, in this generation, about the most admired politician for a very, very long time, and for good reasons.
Does he still enjoy that admiration, do you think? And
yesterday I was asked that, and I said he is or was the most admired politician, depending on who you ask. And it's precisely because he's one of the most affable politicians around. He's accessible, he's good looking, he has a certain nobility, he has the political track record, he has experience, he's your guy.
So if you take all the other people, put all the other people on the table, he sort of stands apart because he's already actually got the presidential experience. So you think that based on that, at the primaries level, he stands a better chance?
Because in 3 years or 2 years before today, or less than 2 years before today, 216 district assemblies, he nominated all the DCEs. You have 106 members of parliament. More than 80%, more than 80 to 90% of those members of parliament were all at different points in time served in his government. There are many members of parliament today he brought from political obscurity and brought them to the national stage and given them some political relevance. All of these people owe a certain allegiance to him. So all of these people, it is not surprising that you find 94 of them backing his bid. Of course, I know, given where I sit, that some of the people did it just because they wanted to see to belong. Not all of them will vote for him, because some of them have reservations about his leadership of the party and what that represented for the party and its history and its values. So not all of them will vote for him, but a large chunk of them will. And they will not only vote for him, they will canvass for votes for him. Well, so winning the primary
sounds pretty much like a done deal for him. Malik, I'll have you speak to the national elections, because that's really where the cut is. Let me read for you this quick comment based on what you just said. Thomas S. says, Thomas ST says, yes, JM has won in advance. Ghanaians have seen the true character of Nana and his NPP in the light of their abysmal performance in government. Profligacy, large government, bribery and corruption, stealing, cronyism, tribalism, loss of jobs, insecurity, disappointment, hardships, and other negativities are the proud products of Nanado. JM will be president in 2022, you mean? He writes 2021. And then Lydia says, Nana will appoint him to be some of the leaders of One Village, One Dam. Say no to Dumso. Hiave says, but why will you ask if he will win? Asemo, this man will trend while we leave more serious social issues to deal with. Okay, so that's your position. I'll read for you more comments, Malik, so you speak to it. But the national elections, based on what this gentleman, for example, has said, and based on what the former president himself said in his declaration video yesterday, that he has come back to right the wrongs. Do you see, Malik, that this is a strong narrative with which to start the campaign? Is this a new admission of wrongs? Because you remember that not too long ago, when some of these same ministers who are endorsing him went to his residence, he said that if you rode a lame horse into a race and you lost, your interest should be determining whether the horse is in good shape, not who will ride it next into the next race. That's what he said. And many people, and rightly so, assessed that statement to mean he was not taking responsibility. Of course, we know that he has taken responsibility for the loss of the party. But when he said that, there was a certain incongruence. Is he shifting blame on the party? Because this is somebody who says, I take responsibility for the loss, blame me and not anyone else. Now he comes back and says he rode a lame horse into the race. So there's a certain ventriloquism here as to what should we make of what he said? Okay, so you got a lot of people behind the scenes laughing. Malik, what is when you say ventriloquism, you are speaking from both sides of your mouth. That's a ventriloquist. Okay, please write it down. That's a word you've learned from Malik today. Vent what? Say that again. Ventriloquism. Ventriloquism. Speaking from somebody who speaks from both sides of your mouth. Malik, please carry on. So it left many people confused as to exactly what he was saying. Nonetheless, he's their best shot at the next election. And yesterday I was with Idousa Husseini on radio and we're arguing whether he said Mr. Mahama was trying to do the impossible in 2016. And what is that impossible? To break the jinx of 8 terms for one party. That his party had been in power for 8 years and they were not, the Ghanaian people were not interested in extending that term. Given that since 1992, each of those parties has had 8 years. Has that become the norm? If that has become the norm, if Mr. Mahama was not able to break the jinx of 8 years, can he break the jinx of 4 years? That is, hand the MPP a one-term presidency. Can he do that? That's a fundamental question. On the back of that, let me read to you for you some of the comments that we're getting so far. Alex Ahinkra says, John 20:20. After he said this, so he's quoting from the Bible. After he said this, he showed them his hands and said, and sighed. the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Malik. And he quotes John 20:20. Kakra Bonsu says, we will compare both parties of their 4 years rule, then we'll see who comes tops. Economy, performance, security issues, infrastructural development, political governance, corruption in both government for 4 years, family and friend governments, which parties come top for 4 years, then we can measure corruption scandal for both parties for 4 years, vindictive politics for both parties within 4 years. Then we can also compare with political parties, which political parties comes tops. Then Ghanaians will look at both parties and make a final decision in 2020. Now, Malik, that's a very interesting comment, despite, even though he puts it in a very convoluted manner.
It's quite complicated too. Do you remember what the Mills Mahama government did by the time they had done 4 years, by 2012? Do you remember?
No.
That's a point.
So which is
how do you make a comparison between what was done in 4 years under Mills Mahama and what was done, or what is being done, or what would have been done in 4 years between Bawumia and Nana Akufo-Addo?
So the question that I had on the back of that, Malik, is whether or not Ghanaians will really be looking at, I mean, do we have the level of sophistication of the Ghanaian voter to the place where they're going to consider all of these things to make a decision?
That's the point. I think voters look for simple things. And I said to people before the 2016 election, there's no doubt that President Mahama did great stuff in terms of infrastructure. Nobody doubts that. Except also that history has shown that in Ghana, the electorate do not consider infrastructure and tangible stuff when they are voting.
They don't?
No.
Anymore?
The determining factors are perceptions. How they perceive the candidates running the election. That's what determines the vote, not infrastructure. And I'll give a simple example. Look at HIPIC, the schools that were constructed under the HIPIC initiative. In those days, if you travel, you would find all these schools lined up by the roadside.
Well branded.
Great. Virtually every school in this town, especially in rural area, is a polling center. Those schools were dilapidated structures that were polling centers. The people went to those dilapidated structures and voted for the NDC.
Then you come back and it's become a HIPIC infrastructure.
They still went and voted for the NDC. That was the clearest example, because at the time you are going to cast your vote, the last time when you voted, this was a dilapidated structure. Now you are voting in a better structure for your children to go to school, yet they voted against the MPP, an MPP government which built that school, and they voted for the NDC. Okay. Why? Perception. How do they perceive the two parties? That is what determines their vote, not the infrastructure.
Malik, let me take your very final words on this interesting times that we all seem to perceive ahead of us.
So we are in uncharted waters. We have never had a sitting president lose his seat and then come back to run again. So we are going to have a number of firsts in the elections. So we are going to have an incumbent president who lost his election, now his former president, at the same time his flag bearer, and now he's competing against a 3-time or 2-time loser who defeated him in the last election, who is seeking his second term against the guy who lost his second term bid to this guy. So very confusing. So many firsts in the next election.
So many firsts in the next elections. There will be very interesting times, and you obviously want to follow. You know where to get the information. You know where to get the crisp analysis and where to get the thought-provoking sound bites, right? It's right here on JoyNews. We'll be following that to bring you all the updates. Malik Abbas Dawood, thank you so much for coming through to the studio. Now, senior lecturer in the University of Ghana Political Science Department, Professor Ransford Jampo, has also been speaking. He's advising former President Mahama to work hard to gain the acceptance of the National Democratic Congress rank and file in the face of stiff competition. Professor Jampo says though the former president is known by the party faithful, he still needs to convince them that he is capable of leading them to victory in 2020, especially after suffering defeat, a miserable defeat at that, in 2016. He's been speaking on the Super Morning Show.
I was captivated. I had to watch and listen to him announcing his bid. It showed a lot of seriousness and all that. I think this is a new strategy that he adopted to announce. And I said, hey, this man is not a president. Don't see the way he's the medium he chose to announce his candidature or his decision to contest. It is important for him to be advised that, yes, popularity he is, but there are other aspirants who are also working behind the scenes very hard to also court some popularity for themselves. So politics is not about all for what you do for the cameras. It's also about what you do behind the scenes and door to door, and that also endear yourself to people who really matter in deciding who becomes a flag bearership. And so you must be mindful of that. Even though I'm also aware some are not doing so well in declaring or making people know that they also want to contest. Some are engaging in utterances that, in my view, are politically suicidal and would harm their fortune. But generally, there are others who are also serious, who are also trying to court popularity for themselves.